Greetings from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the oldest of the original 13 colonies. On June 25, 1788, it became the 10th state to join the Union. With 7.6 million residents, it ranks 12th in population.
There's Northern Virginia, which is not the South. It's all suburbs of Washington, D.C. Southern Virginia tends to be more farming community, more factory workers. They believe in God and country and red, white, and blue.
Virginia took its name from Queen Elizabeth I, also known as the Virgin Queen. But in a bit of historic irony, the well-known slogan, "Virginia is for lovers," has become part of America's lexicon. Invented by a marketing firm in 1969, it initially read, "Virginia is for history lovers." And for good reason.
No matter where you grow up in the United States, when you study American history, you study to a great extent Virginia history.
Henry's most famous speech was delivered in 1775 at St. John's Church in Richmond. With courage and elegance, he cried, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death."
3 weeks before the lanterns were hung in Old North Church, Mr. Henry made his liberty or death speech right here.
Henry's leadership did not end once the Revolution was won. He also served 5 terms as the first governor of the state. As for presidents, 8 have come from Virginia. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, Zachary Taylor, and Woodrow Wilson.
I'm very proud of the presidents that came. They're our forefathers, you know. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. These are brilliant, brilliant people.
Aside from all the presidents, Virginia distinguishes itself in other ways. For starters, it doesn't even claim to be a state.
Of the 50 states that are actually commonwealths.
I'm quite fond of that. I don't like to be called a state. I got the seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia tattooed on my leg.
Really, there's no difference in modern terms between a state and a commonwealth, but it's a term going back to the colonial period of the commonweal. Those in governing authority are looking at the wealth of the common people as their special charge.
In the 1780s, Thomas Jefferson wrote a book, in fact, it's the only book he ever wrote, called Notes on the State of Virginia. And if you look at that, you realize that Virginia was world famous in the 1700s and in the 1800s for its natural wonders. These were world famous attractions before anyone knew about Yosemite or Yellowstone.
The first Englishmen to gaze upon the wonders of Virginia were fortune hunters, whose purpose was to make a profit for themselves and the Virginia Company of London. On Jamestown Island, they established the first permanent English settlement in the New World, a full 13 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. But these early colonists were hardly Virginia's first residents.
What they didn't think of was the fact that the Indians had a well-developed culture of their own.
And of course, they brought over English ideas about government, about law, about the ownership of property, which the Indians, for example, considered that all land was just something that was sort of held communally for the benefit of the community.
The land was certainly good to the English community, as they successfully planted tobacco and other crops. The desire for more territory increased, along with the population. By the 1670s, Jamestown Colony had some 35,000 residents, but with the newcomers pushing further and further into the wilderness, conflict with the natives seemed inevitable.
The tributary Indians dealt with all this rather well, but as they were pressed back toward the falls of the major rivers, they encountered hostile, stronger, warlike tribes, Susquehannocks, Iroquois, that lived in the interior of the continent.
Escalating tensions with the Indians sparked political discord in the colony. 2 pivotal characters emerged: Sir William Berkeley, Jamestown's royal governor, and his cousin by marriage, a young man who wanted to exterminate the native population. His name was Nathaniel Bacon, and he's best remembered as the instigator of events now known as Bacon's Rebellion.
Small farmers who ran outlying plantations and farms felt that the governor and his group in Jamestown were not taking care of them, were not protecting them.
What little land was left to the Indians at that point, these poor whites wanted to seize it, and they wanted kind of a government sanction to do that. And Governor Berkeley wouldn't give it to them. And so they initiated wars on their own against the Indians.
Bacon led 2 preemptive expeditions against the tribes. While he became a hero to many colonists, he couldn't get the governor's support. Ultimately, Bacon's men took control of Jamestown itself and then tried to destroy it.
And they literally put the town to the torch. They went from building to building, setting them ablaze. In fact, some of Bacon's followers burnt their own houses that they owned here on the island, and they even set fire to the State House and the church.
Bacon even wrote a document he called a Declaration of the People, leading some to suggest that his rebellion was, in fact, the first American Revolution.
Bacon and his men actually took a pledge to defy the Crown of England as well as the royal governor. And so when the word reached London, London sent troops. By the time the troops got to Virginia, Bacon was dead and gone. The rebellion was over, but the troops stayed.
Bacon's rebellion began a legacy that saw Virginia at the forefront of America's most pivotal moments. In 1781, the last great battle of the Revolution was fought just 25 miles from Jamestown on the Yorktown Peninsula. Some 80 years later, the Civil War left Virginia's soil soaked with the blood of Americans fighting Americans. With the Confederate capital Richmond just 90 miles from Washington, the state saw more major battles than anywhere else.
The land between Richmond and Washington became the bloodiest ground in the Western Hemisphere. There's nothing equivalent to it in terms of the battles, the skirmishes, the civilian population being caught in the middle of the war.
Given its role in the nation's early military history, it seems only fitting that Virginia is also home to the symbol of America's more recent military exploits, the Pentagon. In the summer of 1941, the possibility of the U.S. entering World War II was becoming increasingly real. So, U.S. leaders turned their attention to the 24,000 War Department employees spread out in 17 buildings around Washington, an inefficient arrangement that wasted time and money. Army General Brian Somervell was appointed to tackle the problem. On a Thursday evening, he pulled together a team of his top engineers and architects. First, Somervell told them the new building had to be located somewhere in Arlington, Virginia, because of its proximity to the capital. Then he dropped a bombshell. He wanted the plans by Monday.
Somerville, one weekend, came up with this initially crazy-looking idea of a pentagon-shaped building, 5 sides containing concentric rings. It's like a 5-sided donut with a hole in the middle. It turned out to be an incredibly efficient design, and in square footage, it was the world's largest office building for many years. And yet you could go from any one office to any other office in the entire building in less than 7 minutes' time, thanks to the 10 spokes that connected the 5 concentric rings.
The shape was chosen in part because it fit well with the existing road network at the proposed site. But concerns that the new building would obstruct the view of the nation's capital from Arlington National Cemetery caused President Roosevelt to ask for a new location. Construction on the Pentagon began September 11th, 1941, 60 years to the day before the 9/11 terrorist attack that nearly destroyed it. The project was rushed to completion in a period of about 16 months. Nearly twice the size of Chicago's Merchandise Mart, more than 3 times the floor space of the Empire State Building, the Pentagon today is an important icon for the nation and the state.
You can't have something that big, that powerful, and with that much money flowing through it not have an impact on a state like Virginia. And it did have a tremendous effect on shaping the history of Virginia in the last half of the 20th century and into the 21st century.
On September 11th, 2001, I was in London, and everyone spoke to me about the attacks on New York City and Washington, D.C. And I had to correct them that the attack was actually on Virginia, that the Pentagon was in Virginia, is in Virginia, not in Washington.
From 1607 to the 21st century, Virginia has shaped and influenced the American experience. It is indeed a place for history lovers.
There's Monticello in Charlottesville, the home of Thomas Jefferson. There's Mount Vernon in northern Virginia, the home of George Washington. There's Colonial Williamsburg, one of the first settlements in America. It's just unreal. Every 30 miles, there's another historic marker about something in American history that happened in Virginia.
Look here. I'm talking about America. Sweet America.